No matter how many times you say it,
there was
didn't happen.
research. There was research done with Dr. Shi and Dr. Barrick. They have collaborated on gain-of-function research where they enhanced the SARS virus to infect human airway cells, and they did it by merging a new spike protein on it. That is gain-of-function. That was joint research between the Wuhan Institute and Dr. Barrick. You can't deny it.
Senator Paul,
Dr. Fauci, we don't know whether the pandemic started in a lab in Wuhan or evolved naturally, but we should want to know. 3 million people have died from this pandemic, and that should cause us to explore all possibilities. Instead, government authorities, self-interested in continuing gain-of-function research, say there's nothing to see here. Gain-of-function research, as you know, is juicing up naturally occurring animal viruses to infect humans. To arrive at the truth, the U.S. government should admit that the Wuhan Virology Institute was experimenting to enhance the coronavirus's ability to infect humans. Juicing up superviruses is not new. Scientists in the U.S. have long known how to mutate animal viruses to infect humans. For years, Dr. Ralph Barrick, a virologist in the U.S., has been collaborating with Dr. Shi Zhengli of the Wuhan Virology Institute, sharing his discoveries about how to create superviruses. This gain-of-function research has been funded by the NIH. The collaboration between the U.S. and the Wuhan Virology Institute continues. Doctors Barrick and Shi worked together to insert bat virus spike protein into the backbone of the deadly SARS virus, and then use this man-made supervirus to infect human airway cells. Think about that for a moment. The SARS virus had a 15% mortality. We're fighting a pandemic that has about a 1% mortality. Can you imagine if a SARS virus that's been juiced up and had viral proteins added to it, to the spike protein, if that were released accidentally? Dr. Fauci, do you still support funding of the NIH funding of the lab in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, with all due respect, you are entirely and completely incorrect that the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Do they fund Dr. Barrick?
We do not fund.
Do you fund Dr. Barrick's gain-of-function research?
Dr. Barrett does not doing gain-of-function research, and if it is, it's according to the guidelines, and it is being conducted in North Carolina, not
You don't think inserting
in
a bat virus spike protein that he got from the Wuhan Institute into the SARS virus is gain-of-function?
That is
You would
not
be in the minority because at least 200 scientists have signed a statement from the Cambridge Working Group saying that it is gain-of-function.
Well, it is not. And if you look at the grant and you look at the progress reports, it is not gain-of-function, despite the fact that people tweet that.
So do you still support sending money to the Wuhan Virology Institute?
We do not send money now to the Wuhan Virology
Do you support
Institute.
sending money? We did under your tutelage. We were sending it through EcoHealth. It was a sub-agency and a sub-grant. Do you support that the money from NIH that was going to the Wuhan Institute?
Let me explain to you why that was done. The SARS-CoV-1 originated in bats in China. It would have been irresponsible of us if we did not investigate the bat viruses and the serology to see who might have been infected.
Or perhaps it would be irresponsible to send it to the Chinese government that we may not be able to trust with this knowledge and with this incredibly dangerous viruses. Government scientists like yourself who favor gain-of-function research.
I don't favor gain-of-function research in China. You are saying things that are not correct.
Government defenders of gain-of-function, such as yourself, say that COVID-19 mutations were random and not designed by man. But interestingly, the technique that Dr. Barrick developed forces mutations by serial passage through cell culture that the mutations appear to be natural. In fact, Dr. Barrick named the technique the no-see-'em technique because the mutations appear naturally. Nicholas Baker of the New York Magazine said nobody would know if the virus had been fabricated in a laboratory or grown in nature. Government authorities in the U.S., including yourself, unequivocally deny that COVID-19 could have escaped a lab. But even Dr. Shi in Wuhan wasn't so sure. According to Nicholas Baker, Dr. Shi wondered, could this new virus have come from her own laboratory? She checked her records frantically and found no matches. That really took a load off my mind, she said. I had not slept for days. The director of the gain of function research in Wuhan couldn't sleep because she was terrified that it might be in her lab. Dr. Barrick, an advocate of gain of function research, admits the main problem that the Institute of Virology has is the outbreak occurred in close proximity. What are the odds? Barrick responded, could you rule out a laboratory escape? The answer in this case is probably not. Will you, in front of this group, categorically say that the COVID-19 could not have occurred through serial passage in a laboratory?
I do not have any accounting of what the Chinese may have done, and I'm fully in favor of any further investigation of what went on in China. However, I will repeat again, the NIH and NIAID categorically has not funded gain-of-function research to be conducted in the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
You do support it in the U.S. We have 11 labs doing it, and you have allowed it here. We have a committee to do it, but the committee has granted every exemption. You're fooling with Mother Nature here. You're allowing super viruses to be created with a 15% mortality. It's very dangerous. I think it was a huge mistake to share this with China, and it's a huge mistake to allow this to continue in the United States. And we should be very careful to investigate where this virus came from.
I fully agree that you should investigate where the virus came from. But again, we have not funded gain-of-function research on this virus in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, no matter how many times you say it.
There was research. There was research done with Dr. Shi and Dr. Barrick. They have collaborated on gain-of-function research where they enhanced the SARS virus to infect human airway cells, and they did it by merging a new spike protein on it. That is gain-of-function. That was joint research between the Wuhan Institute and Dr. Barrick. You can't deny it.
Senator Paul, your time has expired. Dr. Fauci, I will let you respond to that when we need to move on.
Excuse me?
I will allow you to respond to that, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say, I don't know how many times I can say it, Madam Chair. We did not fund gain-of-function research to be conducted in the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Thank you. Senator Smith.
We are a huge success, but we're a country misguided and led astray by media that aren't honest. So, for example, if you watched CNN, you would think that nobody's getting vaccinated, and it's a complete disaster, and whoa, we're stuck in this rut because no one's vaccinated. It's completely untrue. Over 90% of people over 65 who are the most vulnerable are vaccinated. Now, sure, there are a lot of younger people who aren't vaccinated. There's some older people, but 90% is a pretty good success. Over age 50, it's like 75, 80% of people. People are informed. They know this is a disease that can affect any age, but affects primarily the older ages. For example, the one truth you won't be told is an 85-year-old has a 10,000 times greater chance of dying than the 10-year-old. Now, you think we should treat them the same? If you were their doctor, do you think a 10-year-old should get the same health care and the same prescriptions for what they need to do as an 85-year-old? Makes no sense at all. I see 10-year-olds and I see 5-year-olds out on the mall. My wife and I are walking down to the Lincoln Memorial the other day, and I see 5-year-olds in groups led by teachers wearing masks outside. There is no science to that. We got Dr. Fauci spreading mistruths across the country, saying we've got to forcibly vaccinate the kids. There's no science behind any of that. In fact, England is rejecting what we're doing. In England, because of the age skew, because of what they're seeing, that the people most at risk are of an older age, they're actually saying instead of forcibly vaccinating children, why don't we try to make the vaccine doses available for the elderly? Why don't we target our care to those who are at highest risk? We have a problem in our country. We have people who have so politicized science that there are people struggling and dying every day because they've never heard about monoclonal antibodies. We have people dying every day because the government, at the behest of Dr. Fauci and a few other people, have said you can't get monoclonal antibodies if you're in the hospital. I talk to people every day who really have not yet heard of monoclonal antibodies, who get COVID again after being fully vaccinated or sometimes not being vaccinated and are not getting the treatment. Because Dr. Fauci says if you're in the hospital, you don't get it. And so we have medicine that is coming from on high, from a central authority like the Politburo, and doctors are afraid to prescribe. This has never happened in our country before. Doctors were able to make their own decisions based on their own experience, based on studies, based on real-life examples, but using their own discretion. Now doctors are afraid to prescribe monoclonal antibodies, and many of them are disallowed from prescribing it in the inpatient. Realize the ridiculous nature of that. You're in the emergency room, you're sick and you're coughing, you might be dying from COVID. You get to the emergency room, you don't know what to say, you can barely talk. Your spouse has to be able to tell the doctor, please stop in the emergency room. Give them the monoclonal antibodies before they're admitted. Because once they're admitted, we won't treat them. It's the same way with symptoms. You have to have symptoms within the first 10 days. If you don't have symptoms, if you're on day 11, you won't get monoclonal antibodies. It's completely arbitrary, it's capricious, and it has to do with government-mandated guidelines. Let's take some of the other truths or mistruths that are out there. I've said over and over again cloth masks don't work, because they don't. Peer-reviewed studies have shown time and time again cloth masks don't work. But when Dr. Fauci tells you all masks work, when he comes in all draped with 3 masks on himself, with little insignias, clever insignias of different sports teams, he's actually spreading a mistruth that causes lives to be lost. Why? Let's say you have a 75-year-old woman, and she gets COVID, and her husband's taking care of her. Do you think the advice to go into the room to feed her, bathe her, help her get in and out of her clothes while she's sick, wearing a cloth mask is a good idea or a bad idea? It's malpractice. And yet, for some reason, the left-wing media has lauded this man as the second coming, and what he's telling you is absolutely verifiably dangerous to your health. The only mask that really works of any real value is the N95 mask. The surgical masks have some value, but not very much. Most of the air is going around the mask. They just aren't of value. But you have to submit. The man's telling you to do it. You got to do what you got to do. But the thing is when you tell people something's safe, they tend to react to that and have behavior. And in their behavior, they're in favor of something that may well actually be risky behavior for them. The vaccinations, because we ignore natural immunity, we directed the vaccine to the wrong people and still are. So, for example, because of Dr. Fauci's lead, India is accepting his lead as well. In India, there's not enough vaccine. They have 1 billion people. They can't vaccinate enough people fast enough. So if you have 1 billion people and you have 200 million doses of vaccine, who do you think you should give it to? Should you give it to the 10-year-old the same as the 85-year-old? No, that's ridiculous. But what about 2 65-year-olds, and one of them's had COVID and one of them hasn't? The studies are plentiful. The studies are throughout that say that if you've already had it, you have natural immunity to COVID, as good or better than the vaccine. Do you think it makes good public health policy to say that everybody that's 65 should get it, instead of saying, have you had it? Why don't we check you for antibodies if you think you've had it? Maybe you should wait until we've vaccinated every 65-year-old that doesn't have immunity. These are real things. These are real discussions. But if you have these, unless it's on the Senate floor, actually that's not even true. You can say this on the Senate floor and YouTube will take it down. I've had it happen. I've given speeches on the floor that YouTube takes down. So this is a world in which people need to realize and get back to the ideas of classical liberalism were that we debated things. Classical liberalism was about skepticism. It was about you having your opinion and me having my opinion. But the difference between the elitist or the collectivist point of view and the individual rights point of view is, I believe you have every right to your opinion. But if you're a collectivist and you believe that from the very top down, all medical decisions come from Dr. Fauci, and if he doesn't want you to fly, you don't get to fly, it's different from individual liberty, because I think if you have a differing opinion, you're welcome to your opinion. And if an airline has a policy I don't like, maybe I'd choose not to fly. But the idea that we're going to restrict everyone's behavior based on what they decide to do, what's next? People eat too many cheeseburgers, we're not going to give them a heart stent because we think they haven't behaved and they haven't listened to the doctors on what they should be eating. There is no end to this. But in the end, if we're not careful, we are going to spend this country into oblivion. COVID's a big cause of the extra spending we have now. But I can tell you, there are ramifications. They're coming quick. They're coming in the form of higher prices, but there is no reason in the world for us to default. We have plenty of money. We should simply pay for the interest based on what comes in every month. Fauci, I don't expect you today to admit that you approved of NIH funding for gain-of-function research in Wuhan, but your repeated denials have worn thin, and a majority of Americans, frankly, don't believe you. Even the NIH now admits that EcoHealth Alliance did perform experiments in Wuhan that created viruses not found in nature that actually did gain in lethality. The facts are clear. The NIH did fund gain-of-function research in Wuhan, despite your protestations. You can deny it all you want, but even the Chinese authors of the paper, in their paper, admit that viruses